today, Rob's an author, executive coach, and keynote speaker. He is located in Johnson City, Tennessee. I won't say it yet, Rob. I might save it for later. Today's topic's leadership lessons from the battlefield to the boardroom. Rob, welcome to the Rebound Live webcast. And more importantly, thank you for your service to our country. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Matt. Yeah, I appreciate that very much. Great to be here.
Well, I carry around a challenge coin a Lieutenant Colonel gave me.
Nice.
His name is Lieutenant Colonel Matt Karras, who I met when I was coaching in Chapel Hill. He's still located in the Pinehurst area, in the Fort Bragg area. But just tremendous respect for the men and women who serve our country. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, Rob, tell us about yourself. You know, where you grew up, how'd you end up in the military? Who were the most impactful people in your life as you were going through high school and beyond?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess like you in high school, I was a basketball fanatic. You know, it was my life. That's all I did. And I didn't know where it would take me, but I knew that's what I loved. And my dad was probably a big influence on me. He was in the reserves. And so I got a little taste of the military being around him. My girlfriend's father was a Vietnam vet, flew helicopters, later to be my wife. And off I went to college, and freshman year didn't make the basketball team. Because I guess I didn't really clue in that you need a left hand to play basketball, and I didn't have one. So, you know, there it was. So I got cut from the team freshman year of college, and this is 1986, right after I graduated. So there goes that passion to a screeching halt. So it was a crucible in my life, a big turning point. Okay, now what? What do I do? I'm going to get a business degree, but kind of stumbled and found the Army. But it really wasn't out of a sense of patriotism. There were no wars going on. It would help pay for my college education. I was very independent in that respect. So it's like, all right, I'll try this out, join the reserves. Well, I got into it and discovered, okay, I kind of like this, the challenge and the leadership. Born and raised in Massachusetts, and that's where I went off to school. Went to the South in the Fort Benning, Georgia summer heat to basic training. It was a big, profound experience in my life. Really kind of stripped me of my individuality for the first time in my life. And I discovered, yeah, I kind of like this stuff. Found ROTC in college and signed up for that as well. And finished off the program in 1990. Got commissioned as a second lieutenant in the infantry. And off I went into the Army. Again, not really with any aspirations to make a certain rank, stay a certain amount of, length of time. But I ended up doing 27 years, took assignment after assignment and discovered, I'm kind of pretty good at this stuff. I kind of enjoy this stuff, and married my high school sweetheart. She was with me the whole time, and off we went, raised a family, 2 boys. And in 2016 decided to transition for a variety of reasons. We can talk about that.
Well, I'm going to interrupt this. I love the stories and the pivots. And first of all, where'd you go to college?
I went to a small state school in Western Mass called North Adams State College. It's now called Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts.
Gotcha.
I was a ROTC candidate out of UMass.
Gotcha. So, so the thing that I looking back, your failure to make the basketball team, how do you view that in the big scheme of things? Because this is what really this webcast, and my podcast and, my life's work is rebounding from that failure. Looking back on that, what's your mindset now as you look back? I love the quote, it doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. So how do you look at that getting cut from the basketball team?
Yeah, it's exactly that, Matt. And I certainly didn't realize that at the time, that, wow, what a golden opportunity. You just got cut, Campbell. What a golden opportunity. No, it was the end of my life. It was like, oh my God, this is the worst. But to the spirit of this forum here, it happens to people. And what I see looking back at it, I was like, my God, I was so fortunate that happened, because I was never going to make the NBA. I was never going to get, I was never going to go to UNC and be a national champion. Like, I never had that kind of career ahead of me. I love the game, but that's kind of where it ended. So in hindsight, if I was more mature, I could talk to that guy at the age of,
Right.
what was it, 19 maybe, to say, hey man, you got to rebound and you got to use this as an opportunity. This is a big deal. You're not going to play basketball in college. You can play ball, but for a hobby. So what does this mean? And how does this make you pivot? I think I got lucky. I certainly decided to join the Army. There was a decision there for sure, but I got lucky. But really, it was a crucible, a turning point for me. And there have been several. I've been asked on a lot of podcasts, what do you regret? What great regrets do you have? I really don't. I mean, there's certainly maybe some decisions I would have done differently, but every one of them got me to the place I'm at today. And I think that's the lesson, is that look at that as a rebound. Look at that as, okay, this is what's happening to you for a reason.
Right. That's powerful, man. That's powerful. Yep. We can stop the show right now. That is the essence of the book Rebound, From Pain to Passion, and from my podcast, from my work with players to business executives to this webcast. That is powerful stuff. When you were talking about your entree into the military, you said you actually enjoyed this stuff. I talk a lot about in leadership the 6 no's, KNOW, of leadership. And I use the acronym I made up, STEVIT. The first one is for S is know yourself. So you started to like it. What did you like about the military?
The challenge, the ability to lead, the opportunities to communicate. I always felt that I was a good communicator. I've written a few books. I speak now. I didn't know that back then, but the military was this golden opportunity. You and I talked when we met early on, Matt, about challenge and pushing yourself and thrusting yourself into places where you grow. Well, I think in many ways subconsciously, I wasn't really keenly aware of all these things that were happening to me. I just knew that it liked it. It was kind of neat. And I think it was the challenge, like, okay, here's another mountain you can climb, see if you can get to this place. And I got through these gates. I went to basic training, got through that. I went off to airborne school, jumped out of a plane, got through that, went off to Ranger school, all these different things ahead of me that I kind of embraced. And I thought, wow, this is kind of neat. I think I always was a leader in some sense, even back in high school with a group of friends, I was kind of the guy steering the group, making decisions and things like that. So the military really was just a golden opportunity that brought all that out.
Yeah. How do you, going back to if you're coaching young people or young executives or people in organizations, getting to know yourself. I'm an assessment junkie, like DISC, Myers-Briggs, Culture Index, all the indexes, assessments I'll do, because I do think it's so important to know yourself. And that's, comes in athletics, comes in the military. You realize, okay, I can't go to my left, or you realize I'm not going to be an NBA player. Understanding yourself, being okay with that, finding your strengths. How do you do that with your clients? Yeah,
well, it's number one in leadership. People ask me, okay, if you want to make a new leader, what's step one? What is Leadership 101 fall semester of Rob Campbell University or Matt Doherty University? It's self-awareness. You and I spoke about this, it's knowing oneself. And it's not a one and done. Okay, I took a Myers-Briggs, I'm good, I understand. No, I've been taking, self-awareness tests and personality assessments, even after 30 years of leading, and each of them teaches me something, shows me something about myself. And I use those, and it's great to take them and you discover something. Oh, I guess I'm an introvert. Oh, okay, I'm an extrovert. Or, I'm a details guy, or I'm not a details guy. Whatever you tease out of that thing, then what do you do with it? And that's where coaching comes in. Okay, that's great, Matt. Congratulations, you're self-aware. What are you doing with it? This is where coaching comes in. And this is where I start coaching with that common ground, that foundation of, okay, who is Matt Doherty? Who exactly is he? And what are his strengths? And how does he leverage them? And how can I help him adapt to the environments that we're in? Because we don't change, we adapt to the places that we are. And knowing oneself, to me, is the start point. Okay, I just bought a small business. I'm not a details guy. It's going to require me to be a details guy. So I've got to either surround myself with people that can protect me from myself, or know, at least be more conscious that, hey, I'm not a details guy. So I need to thrust myself into those places where I have to be a details guy.
What tools do you use to help people become more self-aware?
I use an assessment called the Forte assessment from the Forte Institute, F-O-R-T-E. Forte is French for strength. And it's a strength assessment. It assesses your dominance, non-dominance. It's on a scale, introversion or extroversion, patience or impatience, conformity or non-conformity. And again, they're all strengths. It's not if you're below the line, it's a weakness. It just lays that out for somebody. And it's not a one and done. You do it every 30 days for an 80-day period, you continue on. Forte is one of that's the main thing I use in coaching to help somebody see themselves a little deeper. So that's the one I rely on. You know, Myers-Briggs is great. I've used the DISC before. That's a valuable tool. I guess what I like about Forte is it's quick. You can do the survey in 8 minutes and it spits out an assessment right away. Because the guy who put it together in Wilmington, North Carolina, has been doing it for, 4 decades now. So, but there's lots of them. And Forte is the one I lean on. There's tons of them, and each one of them is valuable to a leader.
Yeah. The thing that you said, it's not a one and done. I call my leadership a practice, like a doctor calls it a practice. A lawyer calls it a practice. And I never understood why a lawyer or a doctor called it a practice. I jokingly say, Rob, hey, don't practice on me. Go practice on Rob. When you get good, then you can work on me. And so, but now I realize, and I asked the doctor in a recent presentation, why do they call it a practice? He said, because things are changing all the time. And so, it's just like leadership. Things are changing all the time. COVID, technology, different generations. We've got to deal with all of that. So you've got to practice it. It's like you're in football, you're in the red zone getting ready to score, and someone pushes a button and extends the field another 100 yards. You never arrive, and you will make mistakes. And I said this off camera to you early, I've stepped on a lot of landmines, no pun intended, with your background in the military. And I continue to do so. What are some of the biggest coaching, I call them coaching scars, that you've had as a leader, and how did you learn from that?
Coaching scars. Yeah, well, I think a lot of them may have come down to decisions that I made that might have got somebody injured or killed, for that matter. I mean, those are the big ones that, haunt me in a sense. And there's so many others that were not necessarily, that loss of life didn't occur, but it was just bad things that I may have said or decisions that I made.
Give me an example. Give me an example.
Yeah.
I want to drill down on this, because everyone, and I'm 60. I did it a couple weeks ago. I reacted too quickly. My biggest strengths, my biggest weakness, your biggest strengths, your biggest weakness. I'm intense. I'm a driver. I'm competitive. And my brother and I got into it at the airport on the way to a trip down to go see Alabama play Auburn. And I'm like, God darn, when am I going to grow up? When am I going to, avoid that landmine? And I stepped on it. And so, then even at 60 and going through all the training that you and I've gone through, you still make mistakes. And I think, how do you recover from mistakes? What's your self-talk after that? Because confidence is an important thing in a leader, in anybody, but especially a leader, because you got to get out in front and show up the next day present with energy.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the big ones that jumps out to me was I formed a task force in Afghanistan in 2009, the surge. I was a commander of a battalion of about 500 people. Well, my team grew to about 780 because we brought in all these other entities, because Afghanistan required a whole of government approach. So I had people from the State Department, the FBI, CIA, USAID on my team. So a lot of civilians that had never served. But I'm an Army commander, and I was the alpha male, so I believed that that was enough for me to kind of direct this team, where my orders were law. Well, that certainly worked for those in uniform, but not those that were not in uniform. So I started to direct this greater team with that kind of authority backing, at least, in my mind. And it backfired because it didn't react to me like my soldiers did. My awakening, Matt, my self-talk was what I always go back to, and it's just a brutally honest discussion with yourself, because it's just you and yourself. You can say anything, you can talk about anything. It's okay, Rob, why did that go wrong? Should you have done that? Maybe you're dead wrong here. Maybe you've just completely screwed up. And those are bitter pills to swallow. And you go to war with your own ego there, because your ego, well, I'm right. I'm the seasoned commander here. I'm the guy in charge of this entity. I had to use, like we had in the Army, it was called unity of command, as a concept that was very prevalent before our wars after 9/11. And that is, you own everything. Everybody is beholden to you, subservient to you, legally bound to your orders. Unity of command. Well, what we really had in Afghanistan was unity of effort. And this happens in private organizations where you don't own all of those different entities, all those people. They're not direct reports to you. Unity of effort is really, we're all going to the same place. We're unified behind an effort to get to some common end state. Well, I was under the unity of command approach, and I really had to evolve to the unity of effort approach. And this is where I stepped on that landmine, so to speak, and it kind of backfired on me. And this is where I had to double back and say, hey, look, swallow some pride, offer some apologies, refresh the relationship, but really prove to them that I was legit and I was interested in what they could contribute to the greater goal.
Wow, that's pretty heavy stuff right there. Yeah. If anybody has a question, please raise a hand. I will put some people in the penalty box, Chuck McAllister, may give you a 3-minute warning. There's so many nuggets there. With my 6 No's of leadership, Stevitt, the S is self, the last T, the last letter is mine for the truth. And I feel like as leaders, we need to have at least one person on our staff that can come to us whenever they feel it's needed and tell us, hey, Rob, you screwed up there. You screwed up in that meeting. You're screwing up right now the way you're leading this organization. And we, as leaders, need to be conditioned to accept that and embrace it, and reward it, and not get triggered by our fight or flight emotion. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that is perfectly said. That you have to, as I call, surround yourself with people who can protect you from yourself. And those are folks that know you on a deeper level, understand what makes you tick, understand your gaps. And they are the ones that can tap you on the shoulder, like you said, Matt, and say, hey, man, you're getting this wrong, or you're about to step on a landmine. I was fortunate in the Army to have those. They were called sergeants, because the military has every other military in the world envies, and that's the non-commissioned officer corps. These men and women that were just that, would walk up, hey, Doherty, this is going to blow up in your face. Come here for a sec. All right. People that I outranked, by several grades, but that could whisper in my ear and do that. And I think that's a warning sign as a leader if you don't have that person. Certainly my wife is a great sounding board, right? We all have them, right?
But you don't outrank your wife. I just news alert. You don't outrank your wife. Just say it, Rob.
Yeah, I'm a retired colonel. She's a retired 2-star general. So not really, but I mean, rank one, that's where I place her. But this is the thing you're talking about, Matt, is who is that person for you? Do you have them? And if you don't, that's a warning sign. It's almost like you got one tire on the car that's low on air. Are you just going to let that? You're going to be okay with that, or are you going to find somebody nearby? Right. And I think you also have to. There's absolutely that inner voice, but you also have to create that kind of culture in your organization that it's okay for people to be critical.
Yes.
Use tact and be professional. I always wanted that. It doesn't happen automatically. Certainly didn't in the military. I mean, I'm wearing this big eagle on my chest, the rank of colonel. People were terrified. I could end their careers, with a few sentences on an evaluation report. But I wanted them to be comfortable around me, to know that, hey, look, you can speak up. I used to joke and say, look, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I graduated with a 2.6. You all are much smarter than me. I promise you. Now, I'm the leader. I'll make the decision, but I need to hear your voice. But, back to your original point, Matt, is that one person, maybe a few, that can be the ones that whisper in your ear and say, whoa, time out.
So you just touched on humility, I think, and how important that is in leadership, because with your title of colonel and the power in that, yet you had the humility to tell people that I'm not the sharpest tool in the drawer. You got better grades than I did in college. I mean, we don't see that. That's unusual.
No.
You're creating that culture. So as you work with clients along those lines, where do you see the mistakes made in terms of ego and toxic culture? And then we'll go to the questions.
Yeah, sure. It's this notion that is real. I mean, you see it in movies, you see it in places where the leader has to be this all-knowing, all-confident, flawless being. Whereas you expose weakness, or you show any sense of weakness or doubt, that's not good. And so people believe that to be an effective approach in leadership. And so what happens is they work too hard to become that flawless leader, to maybe sweep under the rug some of their shortfalls. But the opposite is true. And the way I coach people to this is like, look, let's start with those leaders that you love to work for. In your life, go back to high school. Who were the leaders that you really enjoy the most? And there's a common theme there. They were humble. They were real. They were okay with exposing their weaknesses and their flaws, but yet they would step up and lead and care for folks. And I think that's where the mistake is made, is that we believe we have to be these perfect beings. One of the best things I ever did in leadership, I learned this late, I created a biography sketch. It's in my first book. It's Personal, Not Personnel. And the biography sketch said nothing of what I had for college degrees and ribbons and all my achievements. None of that. It talked about who I was as a person and what I thought my weaknesses were, and how I wanted to be remembered after I was gone, what I enjoyed doing in high school, what some life crucibles were for me, those turning points for me that I had to rebound from. I put that in a document, about a page and a half, and I sent it to everybody, every 5,000 member of my organization. That was, as you said, humility. That was vulnerability. And people were attracted to that. I wanted them to see me as Rob Campbell and not just this Army colonel beamed down to command this organization.
Wow. All right. You couple things, and I promise to get to the questions, but as you talk, more questions and things pop into my big Irish head. That bio sketch, I would like, obviously, a copy of that. And
Sure.
then books, before I forget, tell us about you have 2 books, I believe, and how people can get them.
Yeah, best place to go is my website, robcampbellleadership.com. I've got the link on there. It'll take you to Amazon. You can get the first book. It's Personal, Not Personnel. That's a book on leadership. And I share a lot of these things we're talking about here and the practices that I use leading in the Army. So from the battlefield to the boardroom. Gotcha. The second book is At Ease. That's about military transition, because I did 27 years. I was institutionalized in something. Just like somebody like in your field, professional athlete becomes institutionalized in that. And then overnight they're off the team, they're out, and now they're into something different. So this is about a transition from something profound in someone's life to something altogether different.
Yep. No, powerful stuff. All right. The person that coined the phrase for me, and now it's mine, because I was told that if someone quotes something to you, then you repeat it at least 3 times, it can become your own. So vulnerability is the new invincibility. Brian Moran said that to me maybe a year ago, maybe on this show. and he's our first person in the queue out of Hohokus, New Jersey, the Chaminade Flyer. Brian Moran, what's your question or comment for Rob?
Thank you, Matt. Rob, this is fascinating stuff.
Thank you.
You know, leadership, I think, has changed a lot between the 20th century and the 21st century. And you talk a lot about, you know, Matt talks about truth tellers in your organization or in your life. And I think that's what you were referring to. That's a hard transition because I see it, you know, we talk about, oh, this is a safe space to talk. And then you talk and then you get blown up, right? And then you're fired. The next thing you know, you're out the door. They shot the messenger. And so everybody else sees that and says, okay, lesson learned, don't talk, don't be a truth teller. And I think really over the last couple of years, COVID has had such an impact on our lives. And, you know, who do you trust and everything that you've known about life. You know, you talk about being institutionalized.
Sure.
We all had this commute every single day, and there was a routine to our lives with our work. And in the last 2 years, that literally got turned upside down.
Yep.
And so now we're all trying to figure out, one, who are the leaders? You know, who are the real leaders? Two, how do I operate now? You know, what's the handbook to get my job done? Who do I trust, and when do I speak up? So tell me who is doing leadership well today. Like, who do you look at and say, well, there's a person or there's an organization that really understands the pivot that was needed and can see the field right now clearly and is operating at a higher level?
Yeah, I think I have this theory I call the organizational leadership gap, and it'll address this question of yours. It's a pretty easy graph. You've got growth on one line and time on the other. And one of the lines shows the organizations grow, as you know, they don't stand still, and usually at an upward trajectory. While the leaders that get it wrong focus entirely on that black line, which is, you know, profit growth, you know, market share, you know, to keep a business competitive and healthy, all things they should focus on. But where they miss is the other line. It's the leadership line. And that's where the leader has that keen sense of, okay, I've got to connect with Matt or Sarah or John or Brittany to know them on a deeper level, to understand, as I say, leading beyond the workplace, what's happening in their personal lives, you know, to invest in the culture of this organization, to spend time growing, putting people into sessions like this. That's the other line, but it doesn't get as much attention, so it falls off and it creates this gap between the two, and that results in turnover. So the successful leaders I see have a keen sense of the importance of that. Because like Simon Sinek says, in this field of coaching and leadership, you don't get instant results. A marketing team, somebody else might be able to come in and say, okay, we're going to do this on Monday. By 2 weeks from now, you're going to see this result, tangible. You know, the numbers are there. In leadership, it's like working out in the gym. It's going to hurt like hell for 2 or 3 months. You're going to see zero results when you look in the mirror, nothing. But over time, it starts to take effect. You start to see that definition and things that come out because you're practicing doing these things. And those are the successful leaders that see the value of that and make that investment and spend time each day doing that. One of the things I write about in my first book is, if you want your people, if your people want to know what your priorities are, they'll find it in your calendar. You know, and I coach a lot of leaders to say, okay, take a triangle. And on each corner of the triangle, put the major event you're doing during the day. Maybe one part is finance. Maybe the other part is, you know, sales, marketing, things like that. Maybe the other part is leadership, investing in people, one-on-one time, you know, performance appraisals, you know, coaching, things like that. And what are the percentages fall out in a given day? It's not going to be even 33%. Maybe it's 40, you know, whatever the numbers fall out to be in whatever corner. And then look back at that and say, okay, did I get it right? Because I think over time, if you're spending all your time in finance and marketing and maybe 10% in people, probably getting it wrong. It's just a way to look at yourself. So the good leaders are the ones that recognize that, look at that and say, okay, yeah, I'm not spending enough time here. I knew that when I walked into my organization, I'm sorry, I give long answers to these questions, but when I walked into my organization, I followed the philosophy of what do I want to do or what needs to be done? Because I was a seasoned leader by that point, 24 years, 2 combat tours when I took over my last and big organization. And so I knew a lot of what I wanted to do, but the organization was going through things I didn't quite know yet. So I had to get in there as a new leader and feel that out a little bit, and then adapt my leadership and focus on what needs to be done. But one thing that didn't change was what's important to me. And this is where I coach a lot of leaders. Focus on what is important to you. I think each of us can describe those things, and that never changes. For me, it was investing in people. I knew that would be a top priority for us, because I couldn't tell the future. I didn't know where we were going to go. We were going to get shot at somewhere. We were going to get bombs thrown at us in some places. But if we invested in our people, I knew that we would rise to the day, to meet the day. And so I went in under that philosophy, and that's how I governed my time. I spent, I think, 30% of my calendar was dedicated to investing in people type activities. That was the discipline I put into place. And the leaders that get that kind of stuff are the ones you can do a lot with. I think Matt would agree. In our field, we can't do anything. We can't coach somebody. We can't come in and teach or train unless there's a leader at the very top that gets it, understands it, and wants to make that investment.
That's right. Great stuff. Marlene, I'm practicing Marlene, did I do okay? Marlene is from the Netherlands, and the Netherlands knocked out USA in the World Cup soccer, right? I'm going to unmute you.
Yes, that is true. I am sorry. I put on my Carolina shirt to make up for it.
Okay,
sorry.
Thank you, Marlene. What question or comment do you have from Rob?
Well, I have a little story, and then I have a question of that, how you would handle that in the USA. We had the past month, we had a big fallout of one of our favorite TV hosts. I think he is like the David Letterman of the Netherlands. And suddenly out in the news came that he had been bullying his staff over years and years, and nobody had spoken up because they were all afraid they would lose their job. They wanted to be on that show so much. So that was, the big newspaper did an investigation. That's what came out. Also came out that his superiors or his staff that was at the same level never spoke up to him. So never made him aware, Matthijs, what you are doing is not good. People are getting sick, people are leaving. We don't tolerate this behavior. So now there is this discussion, who is more at fault? Is it the guy himself who under pressure of making a good show was doing this behavior, or is it his superiors that never, or his colleagues that never dared to, mirror him, his behavior? Yeah. And I was, and so this unchained this whole movement in the Netherlands of all leaders, not only in entertainment, but also in big companies. They now come up and speak and say, well, hey, listen, I think I did something as well, but now I'm taking courses, or now I want my people to speak up. So it's unchange the movement, a little bit like the Me Too movement, but then for leadership. And I was wondering how that now is in the US, or how that would be handled. Is that an issue, or is that still more covered and not so much seen?
Yeah, I think boy, there's a lot there, and that's a great story to foster some really rich discussion, because there's a lot to unpack there. But I think there is a lot of that, because you have things are so much more transparent nowadays. Somebody can record you on their phone and these things. And when you were talking at the beginning, I went back to Matt's, inner truth. What's the real truth there? Because there is this in the military. We had the hard right versus the easy wrong. The hard right was for someone to speak up, put this thing, put the brakes on this thing, regardless of who the individual was and how much money he was bringing in and all the success surrounding that. People were being abused. Mm-hmm. And the hard right was to bring that to a halt. The other thing is ownership. When I look at that, who owns the failure there? Well, there's several. certainly the leaders above that or that individual that either could see it or should have seen it have some ownership. And there's no room for excuses here. Well, I didn't know. Okay, well, you didn't know because you weren't an engaged leader. You weren't done in, you weren't doing the work that needs to be done to get deeper into the organization to get a sense of what's happening. You didn't have that person you're like Matt and I talked about earlier that could whisper in your ear and say, hey, there's some poison here. You got ownership in that. Certainly the individual has ownership in it. And so there's blame that goes all around there. But I think you look at it that way. But I like to move more towards, okay, what can we learn from this as a society, as a country, as leaders, and take from this and move on instead of dwelling into the past. There certainly is some examination, some investigation that needs to occur. What exactly did go down? But I think the most important thing is to tease out the failures. And too often, I think it gets swept under the rug. It gets buried under this. Well, let's dig up the videos and let's find out what was said and what he said and she said. Mm-hmm. And what we lose is those golden nuggets of lessons that all of us can take with us and go forward. The last point here, I think, is let's not overreact. And I see a lot of this happening nowadays where, okay, you've got this personality, this TV personality in this show that did something very egregious over several years and, abused several people, whether, horribly or even just, enough to cause them to, bring home angst and depression with them into their personal lives. It was bad. So let's not ostracize all people in that position. Let's not now label all of these people above somebody like that as these evildoers. I wake every morning believing that most people want to do good by their people, by their country, by their organization. But that stuff gets buried because we overreact to these things. Maybe we bring in policies or we start having these discussions that kind of take us too far. I think we learn from it and we apply those things going forward on this journey to getting better. To teasing out the truth. So a lot of similarities, I think, to what you described and what's happening in our country as well.
Well, thank you. And I will see, Matt always asks for a book. And there is this book in Dutch. The title is, if I translated, Most People Want to Do Good. And I'll see if that book is translated in English, then I'll send you the link, Matt.
Thank
Wonderful.
you, Marlene. Thank you. Very, very good insight. Rob, a friend I had lunch with yesterday worked at GE for Jack Welch. Worked at Lowe's, and we talked about leadership. And a lot of the people I work with, sometimes the CEOs are afraid to talk to the frontline workers. And I think the book's American Generals, and it talked about Eisenhower. How'd he go to the front line to visit the soldiers to see how they were doing? They needed to see him, but he wanted to get feedback from them and not just trust, the sergeant or whoever was leading the men. So sometimes people are afraid they get blocked by that middle manager. How do you, again, I go back to mining for the truth. As a CEO, you need to get to the frontline people without micromanaging, with maintaining a trust with your middle manager, but saying, hey, I trust you, Rob, but I need to talk to your people.
Yes.
How do you do that in the military, and how do you suggest CEOs do that in corporate America today?
Yeah, we called it battlefield circulation in the military. And this is where the commander would be with his or her staff at the higher level, in the C-suite, if you will, gathering information, steering the organization from a more strategic level, a 10,000-foot level. And then the commander would leave that group and travel the battlefield to gain that truth, to get out there and see what was happening on the ground. And I think certainly CEOs of private organizations need to do the same thing, to get a sense of what's going on down below. You can do that in a variety of ways. You can pulse leaders across the organization. You can get right down there in the trenches and talk to those that are doing the hard work. But I think you've got to kind of set the stage and early on, and it goes with the culture and this, this vulnerability and this wanting to get us to a better place and helping people understand your role. Matt, I trust you. You're a fantastic leader, but you know that it's my responsibility to see this organization on a deeper level. So if you see me talking to one of your people, let it happen. And don't think that I'm out there mining for something bad to catch you. It's not a gotcha. I just want to get a sense of what's happening. That's going to help me lead you better. That's going to help me lead this organization better. And I think if you start with that kind of, understanding and explaining, hey team, I just arrived, I'm a new CEO, just know that I'm going to be out there, and I'm out there for these reasons, not to catch you and gotcha. And then the last point is, be careful of the assumptions, right? If you're operating off of a data point of 1, you're probably flawed. You got to get a greater picture here. So we use this a lot in intelligence. Is it a single source of intelligence that will allow us to go on this raid to put people in harm's way? Or are we getting several sensors that coming in, signals, video, whatever they might be, that tell us that we've got something here? And you got to use that same approach of leadership is to gather all those facts and get together at least what you think is happening before you take one person's point and then rush back up to the C-suite. So you're all fired.
Right. That's this is awesome. I'm already regretting that this is only an hour. We've got Chuck, we've got Steve, we've got Paul Rafferty. Chuck, what do you have for Rob?
So Rob, I really am enjoying your talk this morning, and I appreciate you being here. I want to go back to something you said at the very beginning, and as you were talking about being cut from the basketball team and the mindset of, as you look back on that and see that really as a good thing, and the impact that it had on you and on your life. So my question is, how did you get to the point where you had that mindset? And 2, how do you go about coaching other leaders and to help them realize that just because they made a mistake or that they failed in an area, that they're not a failure, but it's actually a learning opportunity?
Yeah, I think I got there through maturity. And unfortunately, that takes time, as you know, right? You can't inject that to somebody. You have to grow and experience things. And as I got older and more mature as an officer, I started to see myself on a deeper level. And then I started to understand that these crucibles in life were important things for me. It's hard work. It really is, Chuck. You can sit there and tell a young person all day long, hey, what a golden opportunity this is that you just got fired, or this thing happened to you. But I think the way to do that is through stories. And that's why I love speaking so much, because people want to hear stories. Chuck, I'm really sorry this happened to you. I know this is a bitter pill to swallow for you, and I know that you're probably at a very low point right here. Let me tell you something that happened to me that I think there are some similarities, 20 years ago. And then I lay a story out that there are some, and look what happened. Look where I am today. I was in the same place as you are. I was bruised and battered just like you are, but I rose above it and I came. And you can do the same. I know you can. I have seen this 100 times. That's the kind of stuff that I think can help for the younger folks as you're coaching somebody, is to weave these stories in, whether they're yours or somebody else's, about failures that occurred and what really someone learned from it. Because there are a lot of young leaders out there. Not a lot of people have the seasons of experience, haven't been to the leadership crucibles of combat, but they can still weave in the stories and help people kind of see things on a deeper level and tease out what the opportunities might be.
Good stuff. Mr. Cost, what's going on? Another hooper from the Northeast. Bring it. What do you got for Rob?
Hey, Matt, how are you?
Good.
Really nice to meet you, Rob, and great conversation. I'll make this quick so Paul can have some time. But Matt, just a couple comments. First, I feel you. As a senior executive on a couple boards here, ex-athlete, you think you have it down when it comes to just communicating and having great interactions with whoever you have an interaction with. But when you visit my sister on Long Island, and I go out to visit her, a couple of months ago, and it's like, there's no way I'm going to have a blow up with her. I'm just going to make sure it doesn't happen. I'm going to take all of my skill that I've learned for decades, and it's not going to happen. And then you have a blow up, and you're scratching your head on the way back to Connecticut saying, how did that just happen? So I totally can relate.
Thank you. That's the story. I needed the story, Rob. He gave me the story.
I'm giving you a pass. I'm giving you a pass, Matt, because I'm the same way, just a fired up competitive guy. But we all have very seasoned leadership skills. And it's like, how did that just happen? So just a comment there. Just a quick comment, Rob, about Matt's question regarding how does a CEO, and I actually coach CEOs, work with a ton of senior execs in my career. How does a CEO build that culture so they have interaction with the front line so they can understand. It really comes down to the culture, and it's building that transparency culture where we're not hiding things. We're all in this together. But the CEO's responsibility is to know what's happening on the ground so they can make great decisions for everyone. So it's really establishing that culture up front. That's a gimme. And then, Rob, let me ask you this: leading a brigade in Afghanistan and 750 people with multiple entities. When those entities came together, something about leading an organization or leading a team or a brigade, especially on the battlefield. How did you get an opportunity? Well, it's really important to help people understand in those entities what their roles are, and they're not stepping over boundaries and getting in people's way. So how did you establish those boundaries and helping them to understand what their actual role and mission is within your team and your brigade? How were you able to do that, and how did you have the time to do that?
Yeah, well, you have to do it through word and deed. You can say it all day long. And frankly, I think that's the easy part, is saying it, putting it on a slide, painting it on the wall. But you have to act out in it. You have to communicate it. You got to demonstrate it. And what I did was, I did a lot of introspection in terms of, okay, what do they want? What does this other person want? What's in their circle of things that they desire, want to get done, and the path they want to take? What's in mine? And you overlap the two, and you see where that common ground is. And what I did is I got a little subservient in terms of how can my organization help you get to that place you need to go? Because a lot of those entities that came in and joined my team under fire and combat didn't have the assets that I had. I had a lot more people and units I could throw at the fight. Well, they needed to do things, and I saw the value of what they needed to do. So I could apply what I had for assets to them to help them get there. That was a gesture, right?
Sure.
The other one I think is really big is who's sitting at the table. Who's in the meeting. And I wouldn't hold meetings unless I had that whole of government around me, all the entities that had a take. And I wouldn't always necessarily sit at the head. They would all be there, or we wouldn't do the meeting. So it was a message I was sending that, hey, look, it's important that we're all together, gnashing this stuff out and figuring out, even if we disagree and don't necessarily get along. I think professionally and for the good of the greater organization, we come together and find out what that common ground is and move forward in unison. And I think the leaders always got to have this. And sometimes I say leadership's a lonely business. The CEO will be the only person that might have that philosophy, and the only person in the room that says, okay, I see his point, I see her point. We're going to bring those two together, find some common ground, and make it a decision and move forward. So I had to invest a lot of time there, and I saw that as important. And I was, last point is, I balanced that certainly with my combat role of fighting a very intense enemy with trying to create a greater peace and leave a place better than I found it. And so I knew as the leader, I had to cross into both of those places. Even if I didn't want to be over here, I knew that I had to. It was a requirement because it wasn't about me. It was what was needed for the organization. So I knew I had to do some time over here and here and balance those two things. So it was a level of consciousness I used to do that.
Yeah, no, that's great, Rob. Thank you.
Good stuff. So I like the quote, leadership is lonely. Leadership is lonely. Leadership is lonely. Leadership is lonely. So I said it 3 times, so now I can make it my own. Thank you, Rob. Now we have I should play the Irish fight song. We got Paul Rafferty here, a proud Golden Domer. Paul, what do you have for Rob?
Okay. Rob, I'd like to get your opinion on something. I too was a officer. I was a naval officer for 4 years and have the utmost respect for the senior enlisted. They run the Navy. Some of the pundits on TV talking about Russia and the Ukraine have said that Russia has very senior people and they have very junior people, but they don't have that senior enlisted glue. And they said that's the reason that they're crumbling like they are. Can you give me your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. Like I said earlier, the envy of every military in the world is our non-commissioned officer corps for the responsibility that we place upon them and the autonomy that we give them to do what they do each day. We operated off of this philosophy called mission command in the Army, and that is you spend the time getting the intent, the orders, purpose, key task, end state. You craft that as a leader, and then you empower people below you to carry that out. What happens, and I saw this in Afghanistan because of very Soviet influence there as well, and it's no surprise why Russia is failing so dismally in Ukraine, is that the officers, you can't move until the officer approves. It's got to be this higher headquarters that blesses every single move. And so it stifles that initiative and action down below. I spend the time crafting my intent, and I have subordinates down below that can take left turns and right turns and use their own initiative and figure out how to get to that end state that I described. They might take a different path, but as long as they're meeting my intent and getting there. And that's the beauty of this non-commissioned officer corps, is they can take that commander's intent and operate within that, hold the bridge at all cost, hold the line here, go do this, and they'll find out how to get there. You don't have that in Russia. You've got this higher headquarters that's directing things and frankly not communicating with anybody down below. I mean, there are stories of some of these soldiers that, crossed the border into Ukraine that thought they were on a training exercise. Mm. I mean, good for God, that's atrocious. That's just no way to lead somebody, because like we were talking about earlier, there are things that transcend cultures, countries, organizations, and that is human beings that are looking for some pretty simple things. Tell me what it is you need me to do. Give me some resources, give me some intent, give me some trust, some autonomy, help me understand what's happening at a higher level. And I can take it and run with it. And you don't have that. It's a complete void in the Russian military. And that's why we're seeing, and frankly, I think China would be the same way, because it's very, very hierarchical, not a lot of this autonomy that floats down below.
Well, that's great. Great question, Paul. Really good. One thing that I'm curious as you talk, what urge did you have as you left the military and stepped into private sector?
Yep.
In the military, basically, you did have the power, even though you were a servant leader and emotionally connected. But, at the end of the day, if you said, hey, we need to get up at 6 and we're going to go march down here and we're going to blow up a bridge, people, even if they didn't want to do it, they had to do it. So nowadays we have the work from home, the hybrid workforce. We have, some generations that aren't as motivated to maybe do the things that, the 50 and above crowd wants them to do. How do you coach your clients to manage that?
Yeah, well, it was a stretch for me. I had legal authority, and so what I said was law, and people would stand up in rooms when I walked in. And one thing I discovered when I retired was that the Army didn't let me keep my staff and bring it with me into my encore life. I was all by myself for the first time. And so to your question, I had to spend a lot of time of understanding who is this population and who are these people and what makes them tick. A good example of the Z is the Z and millennial generations. And I submit, Matt, when you were a basketball player with Michael Jordan, your generation needed to be coached different than today's generation does.
No question.
100%.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah. How do you do it?
100%. So I think that there are lots of studies you can do. You can read TED Talks of what is the Z generation looking for? What are the millennials looking for? And then how do I leverage that? I boil it down to pretty simple statements. My dad had a job. He worked in the insurance industry for 40 years. Same office, same secretary, same everything. My son has a lifestyle. Lifestyle is prominent to him. Okay, so then how do I lead under that philosophy? Well, I think it's maybe understanding what is that lifestyle they desire. I'll get the job stuff right all day long. Here's your job description. These are the roles I need you to fulfill. And this is what I'm going to pay you. And these are benefits. Frankly, I think that's easy. It's understanding the person. And I think that's where that's what's new in leadership today, is you got to take an extra step. Like I said earlier, leading beyond the workplace. What's going on in Matt Doherty's life? Not that I want to pry, not that I have the authority to pry. I never did, ever. But I'm interested in what's happening. And I share of myself first. That's my tip, to say, hey, so here's what I'm struggling with. Here's the things that are weighing me down personally and professionally. I'd like to know what's happening in yours. And this services, I think, the lifestyle side of things to understand what's making people tick. Flexible work hours, work from home, all these different things that are now entered into the fray. how can I service these things? And if I can't, then how do I explain to somebody, hey, look, you can't work from home and here's why, but here's what I'm going to do to help you kind of build that lifestyle. So at the end of the day, it's really just about a deeper understanding of this new generation and not fighting it, but embracing it and then tailoring your leadership to that end.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff, sharing your struggle. If you were running a company today, could you, I try to, you have the military and sports background, which I think is tremendous. My background's just sports, and I think of, okay, you have some people that have to be in the office every day. You just need them for whatever their role is. Some you don't. So you almost treat it like a football team. You know, the kickers can go off on the side. They don't get their pants dirty. They're not in a weight room like the linemen are. So, and you explain to them, to the team, hey, the kickers don't need to be in the weight room, you know, lifting 300 pounds, but the linemen do. So you define the role. So the kickers don't need to be in the office, but the linemen, you need to be in the office every day. And yet we're a team. And you talk about culture, driving a culture in that fragmented workplace is a challenge. We have less than 3 minutes to go. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think your story is perfect, Matt. You just use the sports team analogy. Hey, look, you got a kicker that doesn't get dirty much, you know, when he's on the sidelines and blah, 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 whatever that might be. Well, you've got this position of an organization. Don't talk about people. Talk about positions and what they do to serve the organization. This position doesn't require the individual to be in the office all day long. And because of that, that person in the position can serve the team in a greater sense and get us to that goal line to help us win a championship. Okay, so it's going to require different things of different people. And I really do believe at the end of the day, people understand that. They get that. They know it's not just going to be, you know, one thing for all. So you can balance that, I think, with a hybrid of work from home, those that need to be in the office, and explaining why that is. And really talking to somebody at a deeper level of how do you individually contribute to the greater goal here? That's a challenge of leaders that they need to do. So I think explaining that, but then also knowing when you ought to bring the team together, because nothing beats interpersonal interaction and communication. People need that. We're social beings, period. But don't bring them together just for the sake of bringing them together. Have a reason or a purpose behind it.
That's great. We have 1.5 minutes. Anybody with any last minute questions or comments? And Rob, how do people, again, get in touch with you and talk again about your book and what services you offer?
Yeah, it's probably three main things. The website, robcampbellleadership.com, is pretty active. I blog twice a week on Fridays and Mondays and Fridays. I write every one of those myself, so I'd be happy to put people on that blog distro. It's free. And the other place is LinkedIn. I'm very big on LinkedIn. I got 20,000 followers, and I interact there a lot, where I'm doing a lot of posting and interacting and messaging. So just great places to interact. They're wonderful forums because you can do that now virtually.
Your mission, I wrote it down, to make a difference in the lives of others through optimistic leadership.
There it is.
How'd you come up with that?
I went through a weekend course called True Growth, and it was the first time in my military career because we're very selfless. It's all about the organization. It's not about us. This was a weekend I could focus on myself and tease out those things that I knew to be important, my core purpose, why I'm placed on this earth. So I was fortunate to go through that course. I came out the other end with that statement, and I know that I have to be true to that in whatever I do. And that's what brings me fulfillment and flow state if I'm doing those kind of things. Forums like this are beautiful for that mission statement right there. So that's never going to change. I got to stay true to it.
Rob, thank you very much for your time, for your service to our country. Awesome discussion. Look forward to staying connected with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt.